Awesome. So today, we're going to be starting out talking about the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and then going into the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. So what is NIST? NIST is an organization that has a long history within the United States. It started out during the post-revolutionary era as the Office of Standard Weights and Measures and has since evolved into an agency with many different programs and a broad mission to promote innovation and industrial competitiveness by advancing measurement science, standards, and technology in ways that enhance economic security and improve our quality of life. So as a part of these standards, NIST provides technology standards in the form of frameworks, such as the Cybersecurity Framework and the AI Risk Management Framework. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is going to come with three key components here: the profile, the tiers, and the core. The core is going to be published by NIST. So the essential three pieces that we're going to see here are all going to come from NIST publications. The framework core consists of 6 functions, which are the 6 basic cybersecurity functions at the highest level. These functions are then broken down into categories, which are groups of cybersecurity outcomes, such as asset management or supply chain management. These categories are then broken down into subcategories, which are specific outcomes about technical or management activities. Subcategories are not specific instructions. They are outcome-driven statements meant for general purpose use amongst a variety of organizations. So these subcategories are not meant to be a checklist for you to go through and check off every single activity. We're meant to apply and map these functions and categories with our specific goals and objectives and use only the ones that are relevant to us. So not every single category and subcategory will apply to your organization. And because these subcategories are outcome driven, it doesn't mandate how organizations must achieve these different outcomes. So that enables you to use risk-based implementations that are customized to your organization's needs. NIST releases mappings publicly on their website to some of these risk-based implementations. So for example, here you can see the NIST CSF mapped to NIST 853, which is a set of security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations. These controls will give you even more specific instructions and directive on achieving the outcomes listed by the NIST subcategories. So how do we decide which of these NIST categories are actually going to apply to our organization? The first thing you have to do is establish your mission objectives. So NIST kind of has a base set of objectives that they publish in their documentation, but if you read through all of the use cases that they publish, these objectives are completely meant to be tailored to your organization. So as an organization, we have to do some workshopping with our executive team, maybe a CISO and your security managers and whomever else is making these security decisions at your organization. And you have to figure out the bottom line, what exactly are we trying to get done and what are our overarching goals and objectives? Once we've defined our mission objectives, we can take these objectives and start mapping them to the relevant categories and subcategories. And then we can start assessing the implementation tier. So the implementation tier is an assessment on how an organization views cybersecurity risk and the processes in place to manage that risk. It starts with tier 1, which is partial, meaning that cybersecurity practices are not formalized, there's limited awareness at an organizational level. And it goes all the way up to tier 4, which is adaptive. It means the organization is adapting its cybersecurity practices based on previous and current cybersecurity activities. Assessing these tiers might be done quantitatively or qualitatively, depending on the context and the subcategory. But either way, it's going to be something that requires insight from the organization. So we're going to need to do some more workshopping, some more talking to our stakeholders and knowledge owners within the organization to figure out where things stand currently. This current assessment of our cybersecurity posture using the CSF is called a profile. So we've built up our current profile, and with a tool like Abacus, we can already roll this up into some higher analytics and insight. So here you can see we've aggregated all of those different implementation tiers into a total security score, as well as individual security scores across the different key functions. And then we can also look at the pie chart to see what tier we mostly lie in. Down here, we can see we can also aggregate across to the objective level. So we can see our cybersecurity posture across our different objectives. And then we can also use this to run dependency analysis across our different objectives and our different subcategories. So we can drill down from these subcategories to the capabilities and processes that are related. And then from there, we can review the actual technologies that are being used by these processes. Using a graph database like Abacus makes the sort of downstream and upstream analysis across your architecture easy. Once we've built a current profile, we can work towards building a target profile. Building a target profile requires the same type of activity as the current profile, in the sense that you're assigning implementation tiers to see how we're achieving these different cybersecurity subcategories. But instead of assessing the current state, we're describing our target state, and we're assessing those areas where we want to be more adaptable. But once again, this is going to require more workshopping, talking to your stakeholders, discussing our mission objectives, and creating a cohesive cybersecurity vision for the organization. In Abacus, we can create a target architecture and start actually modeling our different targets and do scenario analysis. So we can create future state solution diagrams and start modeling with new technologies without actually implementing them. And then we can go and do things like impact analysis and financial analysis to show how these technology transformations will affect our larger business and improve our cybersecurity practices. Once we've built this target state, we can do gap analysis between our current and our target. So here we can see some statistics comparing our current security score and target security score, allowing us to track our cybersecurity progress as we implement these different measures. We can also individually track the security gaps in our individual mission objectives. So here we can see that some of our missions with the largest gaps and the smallest gaps as well. So we can hone in on those objectives with the largest gaps and rearrange our resources to mitigate those associated risks more. Using these methods, we can use the NIST CSF to implement a real cybersecurity plan tailored to our organization. Okay, so now we've talked about how organizations can secure their general cybersecurity posture. We can talk about AI systems specifically. Under direction of an executive order around safe, secure, and trustworthy AI systems, NIST also published another framework called the AI Risk Management Framework, or RMF for short. And it provides a similar framework to the NIST CSF, but for managing AI technologies and their associated risks. You can see here the AI RMF is structured the same way as the CSF, making implementation easy. It consists of functions, categories, and subcategories the same way the CSF does. Just now, it's focused on ensuring that your organization is using trustworthy AI systems. So a trustworthy AI system is one that is lawful, ethical, and technically robust. So the NIST AI RMF, it provides a framework for discovering and assessing risks with your AI systems, as well as new risks and considerations that might need to take place. But it does it in a similar structure to the NIST CSF. Here you can see we're again using implementation tiers to assess how these outcome-driven subcategories are currently being achieved. And again, these subcategories are not meant to be a checklist. So we're still going to have to map these categories and subcategories depending on which ones are going to be relevant to us. For example, if we're using a third-party AI system, then some of the design and development related categories might not be applicable to us. In this use case, we're creating a hiring profile, which means instead of applying the AI RMF to our enterprise as a whole, we're assessing the technologies used in our hiring process to make sure they're unbiased, safe, and reliable. Using a tool like Abacus, we can associate these subcategories and risks with those actual technologies being used and start aggregating our different scores to see which areas pose a risk and start doing that downstream analysis to see which technologies are being used and affected, as well as looking upstream to see which areas of the business are using these AI technologies. So in short, the NIST AI risk management framework provides a very similar structure to the cybersecurity framework to guide organizations to creating and using trustworthy AI systems. Okay, so now we can open up to the Q&A portion here.
Yes, great. Thanks, Kishan. As a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, please feel free to enter those in the Q&A function that's at the bottom of the Zoom screen. While we're waiting for questions to come in, Kishan, I'll ask one. If someone is looking to get started with this, with implementing this framework, either one, the regular NIST framework or the the AI framework, what would you suggest that they do in order to get started? Is there kind of a first step?
Yeah, I think the first step is going to be aligning those mission objectives, right? So we need to come up with a cohesive goal, cohesive plan on, not a plan, but a cohesive end goal on where we're going to be, right? We need to figure out which areas of the business we want to improve, what our specific goal is going into this entire cybersecurity practice. So yeah, to answer your question, Melissa, I think the first thing is going to be talking to those stakeholders and getting a set of mission objectives that we can start tying these different outcomes into.
Excellent, great. All right, does anyone have any questions? We haven't had any come in quite yet, but people can certainly feel free to send them afterwards, and we could always get back to you. Any other final thoughts, Kishan, that you want to leave the audience with? Looks like you've done a good job of covering all of this since we don't really have any questions.
Yeah. I just want to say that one thing that I've mentioned a lot throughout this is that it's going to require input from your entire organization, right? We need to do workshopping both with people above us, or maybe to go and figure out, what exactly our organization's vision is, what our objectives are, as well as going down and talking to people using those technologies, figuring out how processes work. So it does require that buy-in to use the NIST CSF and fully implement it.
And we have, while you were talking, Kishan, we've had a couple of questions come in. The first one is there a way to measure security readiness on Abacus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in Abacus, we have the Visual Algorithm Composer. So the Visual Algorithm Composer is a no-code way to go in and create metric aggregations and calculated values. So you saw in the demonstration that we had a few security scores that were created. So those can be used as a way to kind of measure the security readiness and generalize some of those different functions and categories. So for example, if you tie together a few categories that are around specifically readiness for disaster recovery and things like that, we can go in, aggregate all of those different scores and come up with our own disaster recovery score. So using the visual algorithm composer, we can go in and create those types of readiness scores and any other sort of metric aggregation across these things that we need.
While we're on the topic of abacus, we had a question about related to the subcategories that you linked to components in the model. What
Mhm.
relationship connections are used for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically it's like a relates to connection in Abacus, but the terminology of the connection doesn't matter as much as the fact that we are making those connections, right? The fact that we are tying these different subcategories to our objectives, and then from there going downstream to our capabilities and processes. So you can find different connection types, different frameworks that can go in and do this, right? If we're going in and connecting to something like an Archimate model or a TOGAF model, we might be tying to different things like physical application components and capabilities and things. But what matters is that we are making those relationships from the subcategories to our technology to our business and creating that enterprise architecture view.
Great. So related to the framework, what main stakeholders would you consult? I mean, is it different related to the NIST framework than anything else? Is it just IT stakeholders? Are there others?
Yeah, that's a good question. For the it's going to depend on the phase of implementation that you're in, right? So early on, when we are setting those different objectives, we're going to be talking to people like maybe a CISO and people on the executive team. We're going to be talking to those IT managers and directors to come up as well as those cybersecurity managers and directors specifically to come up with that vision of where we want to take our cybersecurity program. And then once we get down to assessing those specific subcategories, how we're achieving these different outcomes, you can go down to maybe those different security architects and into those roles that are more in the ground with our cybersecurity practices.
Okay, great, thank you. Um, what are your thoughts, Kishan, on how NIST compares to other standard security frameworks? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think NIST is great because it can be generalized to a lot of different organizations, right? We can use it as government agencies, private organizations. It's just general outcome-driven statements that are going to go in and guide your cybersecurity practices. So yeah, it really doesn't matter the vertical that you're in. You'll be able to go in and find value in the NIST CSF. And it's going to be general enough that you can go in and make sure that all of your different cybersecurity needs are being met.
Great. Another abacus functionality question. Can you import a list of NIST controls and subcategories from a spreadsheet into the model?
Yeah, absolutely. So the subcategories are already available in Abacus. So NIST CSF 2.0 has the subcategories, categories and functions already imported and everything. And in future updates, you will see some of those controls being imported as well. So as of right now, it's just going to be a real simple Excel import to go in and bring in any of those different controls. But we are going to be providing those out of the box very soon as well. So you'll see things like 853 and CSI controls and things like that, mappings popping up in Abacus. So to be on the lookout for that.
So you're saying essentially that it's already available in abacus, ready to go. Is that correct?
The subcategories are ready to go. The controls, you just need to do an import, but we are that will be available in Abacus in the future as well.
It's asking how they should evaluate the control effectiveness on abacus.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the implementation tiers, right? So going back to the implementation tiers, that put it in kind of a 1 through 4 in terms of adaptability. But that ability to just do 1 through 4 kind of scoring on how we're achieving these different controls, if they're applied or not. Some controls, it might just be a binary thing where it's yes, we're doing this, no, we're not doing this. So some things are going to be more true or false. Other things you might have to go in and implement a scoring that we can go in and aggregate. So it's going to depend on the controls, but either way, we can go in and do tiered scoring, or we can just go in and turn it into a yes or no.